Who ordered the assassination of Haiti's president? On Jovenel Moise's watch, the breakdown of law and order, the rise of gang rule had reached new proportions. But to be gunned down in the night at his private residence is a shock. Neighbors heard 2 hours of gunshots, they say. Police only secured the scene at dawn. The First Lady airlifted to Miami in critical but now stable condition. And on Thursday, the police parading what they describe as mercenaries, who they blame for the attack.
We captured 17 people, among them 15 Colombians. We identified them with their Colombian passports. There are 2 Haitian Americans among those captured.
Nico Hines, we were reporting a few months back on the death on the battlefield of an African head of state, Chad's Idriss Déby. Here, we're completely in the dark once again.
Yeah, and this is a really terrifying situation. Obviously, what it does show is just how dangerous Haiti is. I mean, our Daily Beast correspondent, who has been working in Haiti for decades, has not been there for months because the violence, the kidnappings, the instability has been so bad in recent months that she hasn't felt safe enough to even be there. And that's, someone who's used to that, to working in those sorts of conditions. This story is extraordinary, and it just doesn't quite seem to add up at the moment. I think there's still a lot more to come in terms of who ordered this, what were these mercenaries doing. Some of the reports suggest that they encountered they somehow tricked their way in. They didn't have to shoot their way in, that they immediately got to him and killed him. But if that was the case, why didn't they get the hell out of the country before everybody noticed and daylight came up? Other reports are saying there were hours of gunfire in the night. In which case, where are all the bodies? Which soldiers were killed that were defending the president, or were there any victims on the other side? I don't think we're getting the full story as yet, and it may be weeks or even months before we do find out.
And the confusion, it's all around, because there's confusion over what happened, Catherine Field. There's confusion over who's running the country, because there are dueling constitutions. And according to one of them, it's the head of the Supreme Court, who, by the way, recently died of COVID. Mm-hmm. And the other, it's the prime minister, except there's even there 2 different prime ministers. One had been named the day before, but hadn't yet been sworn in.
Yeah, I think on this one, we can really start to look at what has been going on in Haiti since, not just since that massive earthquake they had in 2010, but before that. This is a country that has received enormous amounts of aid. It's received an enormous amount of help in trying to prop up the institutions of a state, which clearly have not worked. So what happened to those $13 billion of aid that has been pumped into Haiti, that is meant to provide stability, a civil society, to make some sort of functioning country, which it clearly isn't. And there's been another sort of interesting aspect of the COVID on this one, is that Haiti, yes, is a very poor country. It's one of the poorest in that region. And it depends on remittances. And it hasn't had the remittances coming from expats. So the whole situation in Haiti has been getting more and more desperate. And the other thing is those remittances, when they come, generally are not used, according to the data, to go into the local economy. They're used to get out of Haiti. They're used to find some way of getting a passport, getting onto a plane to get out of Haiti and try and find life somewhere else. So, yeah, you could almost put Haiti in the same basket as Somalia, Afghanistan, these countries that, for all intents and purposes, are almost failed states, dependent on aid just to keep going. Remittances,
money sent by the diaspora from places like the Brooklyn neighborhood of Flatbush, home to a sizable Haitian community.
It's a real blow for us because the president was killed while he was still in power. But I don't feel bad because these people weren't running the country well. Moise was a thug. They killed a thug.
It's a bad thing for real. Even I don't like him, even he don't like him, even you don't like him. He's not supposed to die like that.
We want Haitians in the country and Haitian out of the country to come together. We can't trust the foreigners. We can't trust neither the State Department or those people. Many of those rogue diplomats, French, Canadian, and all those white former colonials sitting down making decisions on Haiti.
And Kethevane Gorjestani, there is a lot of resentment towards the international community, including against the United States, for not having spoken up more when Jovenel Moise tried to change the Constitution, and that there were essentially, the U.S. accused of giving him a free pass. And it's interesting because we've heard mixed things from Haitians in the last 24 hours. They want help from the United States. They want an independent international inquiry. But they also want to restore some of the hurt pride we heard in those remarks.
Yes, and it shows really this really different approach from the Haitians vis-a-vis the Americans. You can see it in how the U.S. is responding to the situation right now. I was at the White House press briefing yesterday, and Jen Psaki was asked multiple times and in very different sort of questions about the situation in Haiti, and the response was pretty much the same over and over and over again. She said, we support the democratic institutions of Haiti. We stand by the fact of holding elections by the end of the year, and we are there to assist Haiti if they ask for it. They have actually asked for it now, and just moments ago in today's briefing, Jen Psaki, the press secretary, announced that there was a U.S. delegation going to Haiti to help with security issues with the investigation, including FBI officials who are going now to Haiti to help out with figuring out what's going on. But overall, it seems that the U.S. doesn't really know where to position itself regarding the political situation in Haiti. And we've heard some Haitians, especially Haitians here in the United States, saying that, well, the Biden administration is not really taking a position. They're just pretty much following what previous administrations had done, including Donald Trump, and basically letting things flow and not really taking a position or intervening and not really, trying to do something to help Haiti.
Victor Mallet, that's interesting what Kethevane is bringing up, because we've heard Haitians say, well, the Americans ready, and the French, ready to give whoever's in power in Haiti a free pass as long as they don't side with Cuba and Venezuela.
Yeah, I mean, it's one more example of a country where the West is not really able to exercise, the influence or the power that it wants to do. To me, it's just very worrying, because it's one more example of an unstable country, one more assassinated president, one more excuse for war. It's slightly ominous that, you had this sort of report that some of the people may have come over from the Dominican Republic. So it's just a sort of, it seems to, one doesn't want to be too pessimistic about the world, but really a lot of the places where the US and its allies try to sort of exercise influence, they're not really able to do so in any effective way.
Yeah, we go around the table, Nico Hines, but of course we're no closer to figuring out who done it, who are these people who've been arrested, these Colombians and Haitians who are naturalized Americans.
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of dichotomy there, because if they were such brilliant commando unit, as some people are saying, why did they not manage to get themselves across the border into the Dominican Republic where they could escape? So it seems to me that if they didn't get out of the country quickly, they must have believed that either that they were going to start some sort of a coup, and perhaps the people had told them that they would then be safe. And they would be part of the, protected by the new administration that was going to come in. But that doesn't even seem clear, because normally in these situations you ask yourself, well, who stands to gain from this? And in this case, we've got two prime ministers, both of whom claiming that they should now be the one to take control. Claude Joseph kind of leapt immediately to kind of prime suspect number one in my mind. When he first of all announced the death early on, in the early hours, while the rest of Haiti was still asleep, he was already doing interviews on the radio. He was doing interviews with international media within 12 hours and claiming that he was now running the entire country and had assumed the presidency. And that always makes people think, this is a guy who maybe had a motive for commanding it. Now, this is pure speculation. I don't have any evidence to back that up. But what you have to try and do in these situations is imagine why would something like this happen.
Or Kethevane Gorjestani, you could also wonder, the former president, the predecessor, you're allowed to run twice for president in Haiti, but you can't run consecutively. Michel Martelly, Moise was his protege. They had a falling out. He certainly stands to benefit if ever there is an election.
Yes, I mean, it is totally a possibility, but of course it is, as we've all said, still very early and things are still very murky and no one really knows exactly what has happened. And you see that with also going back to the reaction from the U.S., they're extremely careful in the wording that they use and extremely careful to try to not take sides, to try to not name names, talking about being for the democratic institutions and insisting that they have very little information right now, and so they're trying to stay as far away as possible until they know exactly what happened. And as one of the guests was saying, there are things that just don't seem right, things that just don't fit. And I feel that the Americans sending that delegation to Haiti is to try to figure out what exactly happened and to have a better idea of who might be behind it, because if they take a position for the acting prime minister and then it turns out that he had something to do with it, then the Americans are in a very bad situation. So I think they're trying to wait and see what really has happened, and then they'll make a decision or an announcement.
There's plenty of other suspects, by the way, that are possible in all of this. So, yeah, it's something we're definitely going to continue to follow. And if the United States doesn't want to own this crisis, well, it's because it's got enough on its hands trying to pull out from Afghanistan.